Bills Mafia. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, we will be breaking down all things Bills Jaguars, including an anemic offense, the injury-riddled defense, where we go from here, and peeking ahead to next week's game on Sunday night versus Brian Daboll and the New York Giants. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour post-game show. Today, unfortunately, is not going to be a happy hour celebration. It is, in fact, going to be a Monday evening therapy session as the Buffalo Bills fall to the Jacksonville Jaguars 25-20. I think Jessica Tennis sums it up pretty well here in the comments section. She says, that was horrible. Honestly, that adjective may not be strong enough to describe the game that we had to witness in London yesterday.
I mean, I was about to put in the comment section, smash that like for that trip, for this trip being over. And Phil comes in and says they handled us physically in the trenches. We're going to get into it with our takeaways and things. But yeah, the Jags really kind of put it to the Bills on the ground game as well. The like and don't get hurt doing it, says Ralph Wilson Sr. I think we're going to see a lot of sarcastic remarks like that tonight. But man, it's one thing to lose the game, right? But it's another thing to come out of that game with the injuries that you did, to the significance of players that you did, right? And probably two of the most important players to the Bills defense, if not the two most important. So that to me, I can get past the loss, but the injuries obviously are now going to stick with us for the rest of this season, it would appear.
Yeah, and there was a lot of talk on social media after the game. First, as you mentioned, bad loss. We should have won that football game. Second, we lose our second and third all-pro caliber players in the span of 8 days with Milano's fractured leg and DaQuan Jones's torn pec. However, there are a lot of people on social media, like my comment section was riddled with people saying the season's over. The season's over. We need to make this big splash trade or else our season is over. There was a lot of doom and gloom on Buffalo Bills social media yesterday, understandably so. But I think our season's over, I think that talk is a little bit premature. No, you're not replacing these three dudes that we've lost over the last 8 days. They are irreplaceable. With them healthy, we had a chance to be probably the top defense in the National Football League. But without them, I still feel like maybe we can be top 15. And when you couple that with Josh Allen, with Stefon Diggs, with the pass rush, which is still somewhat intact, in my opinion, the expectations, they probably should go from Super Bowl or bust to simply, hey, let's make the playoffs and let's hope we can get hot towards the end of the season and get right at the right time and make a run in the playoffs to possibly win the Super Bowl. I think that's a fair assessment in where the mindset for Buffalo Bills fans should go. What is your take sort of on the mindset your mindset for the Bills going forward?
I mean, I think it has to be, right? Because otherwise you're going to be miserable for the rest of the season, right? And so, I mean, the priorities kind of shift now, right? We dropped to 3-2. Miami gets that win yesterday against the Giants. The Bills now kind of scrapping for that midfield, right? As far as like being in that mix for, a wild card team. And obviously the division is still in grasp, but right now you really got to focus on winning games any way you can if you're the Bills. And like you got to make the playoffs still as well, right? So for me, I think you look at teams in the past and you think like, okay, well, there have been teams that have won Super Bowls. There have teams that have gone on runs with lesser rosters than what the Bills have, even without these key guys, and that still holds true, right? Even
Mhm.
without these key guys, the Bills still do have a really good roster. Their defense is still going to be pretty good. Like, there's still a ton of good players playing on that defense. The offense still has Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs, as you mentioned. So it's not all is not lost, right? I think the thing that people and it's understandably so getting hung up
Yeah.
on is like, we had a chance to be possibly the best offense and the best defense in the league, and your best chance maybe at winning the Super Bowl
Mhm.
odds wise in a year where you had those two things. That doesn't mean you can't win it now, but it just means the odds maybe aren't as good, and you're going to have to, like you said, get hot at the right time, be in the right place, right time, that type of thing. Where as before, you felt like it was the teams had to knock off the Bills to get, to get past them. Whereas now maybe the Bills have to be the team that knocks off someone else. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, RJ Melville comes in with this comment. He says, technically the season isn't over, but the division probably is out of play and the Super Bowl is a pipe dream now. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago without their starting quarterback, who everyone thought was an MVP candidate in Carson Wentz. Now, obviously, Carson Wentz's career fell off a cliff after that. But I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles literally won a Super Bowl a couple of years ago with Nick Foles, right? So teams can get hot, teams can go on runs, and the Buffalo Bills certainly has an offense that's capable of carrying a football team when they're firing on all cylinders. They just got to be able to do that consistently. And then when it comes to the division, like, again, my mindset from here on out is get whatever we need to do to get to the playoffs. Let's do it. And then once we get to the playoffs, let's see if we can get on a run. Let's see if we can get hot. Let's see what happens. But I still do think the AFC East is in play. Are we the favorites anymore? No, I don't think so. But does Miami probably have the better roster with us missing all of these key players? Yeah, they probably do. But here's the thing. The Buffalo Bills just suffered 3 key injuries in the matter of 8 days. And the way players are dropping like flies in the NFL right now, you see Devin Achane, going down for Miami. We don't know the severity of that injury yet. Miami's 2 or 3 injuries away from just as quickly being in the same boat as us, right?
Mhm.
And then it's a dead heat for the division again, because I don't think the Jets are really going to make a play with the way that offense is literally inept in the passing game. And the New England Patriots aren't even really a National Football League team anymore. So it's a 2-horse race for the AFC East. It certainly looks better right now for Miami, but those things can change over the course of 1 week with the way guys have been dropping like flies in the National Football League. RJ Melville comes in and says the Eagles are also lucky. The Bills are the polar opposite of that. Hey, luck's a part of it. I'm not going to lie. Luck is a part of it. So we'll see if the Bills can maybe change their luck come January and February this year. All right, ladies and gents, we're going to jump right into our biggest takeaway from this football game as I struggle to pull up the graphic here. Every week, we start things off giving our biggest takeaway from the football game, and we have a weekly challenge for you guys. After the show is over, comment on this video with your biggest takeaway from Bills Jaguars. We love your comments in show. Obviously, keep those up, but comments after the fact really help us out with the algorithm, boosts our videos, and we really appreciate your support. So again, our weekly challenge after the show is over, comment on this video with your biggest takeaway. Dave, your singular biggest takeaway from this football game, and then we'll get to some of the biggest takeaways from the comment section.
Well, I mean, I think you have to point to the injuries, right? And I think for me, the biggest takeaway coming out of this game is what do the Bills do from here at these key positions as far as trying to stop the bleeding, right? And does that mean that we're going to see Dorian Williams? Does that mean we're going to see AJ Klein at that linebacker spot in place of Matt Milano? I mean, there's a lot of talk about Christian Kirksey maybe coaxing him out of retirement, but to me, that's not really what you're looking for here in this situation, right? Kirksey was more of the guy you thought could be the player that played in place of Terrell Bernard, right, at that spot. So like, I know these guys are somewhat interchangeable, but to me, that's not really an option here. So is it Dorian Williams? Is it AJ Klein? We'll see. And then at the nose tackle position, we don't know how long. We don't know how long DaQuan Jones is going to be out. It could be the whole season. Is Poona Ford going to be the guy that steps in there? So to me, the single biggest takeaway is not so much the loss, and we're going to talk. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in the offense and defense section, but it's how do the Bills adjust from here, and how does Sean McDermott adjust from here, given that this is his defense this year? He's been doing a really good job game to game and calling this defense. And by the way, the defense largely kept the Bills in this game given all the things that were going against them, given all the rushing yards they gave up. They still kept the Bills in this game with some notable takeaways, but the biggest takeaway from the game going forward is now what do the Bills do to replace these guys?
Yeah, Matt Milano, season over with a fractured leg. I mean, maybe if by some miraculous way, if everything goes right, he can recover in time to like come off IR like late into the playoffs, like maybe Micah Hyde had a chance to. But I mean, they still need to get in there. They need to scope. They need to see if there's any ligament damage. I highly, highly doubt that we see Matt Milano this season. And I mean, he was an all-pro up there with the likes of guys like Fred Warner. I was so pissed watching the game last night. The NBC put up a graphic of 4 key players who got hurt today, and how does that affect the National Football League? And Matt Milano was not pictured in one of the 4 players on the graphic. Daniel Jones was. I mean, so disrespectful to Matt Milano and the impact that he has had on the Buffalo Bills and the caliber of player he is in the National Football League. You don't replace guys like Matt Milano. You just hope that their replacements don't puke all over themselves. McD made some comments today. He said, hey, it starts in-house and then we'll look outside of our roster for people to come in and try to fill the void left by Matt Milano. Dorian Williams was the first in for Matt Milano. However, after a couple of missed tackles, he was benched. Tyrell Dodson went in. He was certainly not perfect. He did make a couple of plays. His effort on that fumble recovery, just coming out of nowhere to pick it up, was pretty incredible. It'll probably be Tyrell Dodson next week, but long-term, I think the Buffalo Bills should be doing everything in their power to get Dorian Williams ready to fill that role. So over the course of the back half of the season, Dorian Williams should be really starting at that weak side linebacker spot.
Well, and it's funny because we go into this draft, right? And we go into the free agent period and we're like, okay, gotta replace Tremaine Edmonds, right? We got to replace him. And then Bills go out and they draft Dorian Williams, and you're like, well, that's not really a replacement for Tremaine Edmonds. He's more of a Matt Milano type of backup player, right? And you're like, okay, well, Terrell Bernard now is the guy that's kind of playing that Tremaine Edmonds role. So like maybe all things considered, like it will end up being a blessing in disguise that the Bills did draft Dorian Williams if they can get up to speed. I think athletically, he certainly has a higher ceiling than Tyrell Dodson. Obviously, I think Dodson coming in this past game, I think was more indicative of him just being more ready to play and make some nice plays. I'm not going to take that away from him because I've been kind of a Tyrell Dodson hater on this show, but I think in the long term, term, you probably would like it to be Dorian Williams if you can't find an out of house option.
Yeah. I mean, Williams at Tulane, first of all, freak athlete, right? Long arms for a shorter, more compact body, but a freak athlete. That's what the Buffalo Bills drafted him. But Brandon Beane even said it in his post-draft press conference. This guy was a see-ball, get-ball type of linebacker at Tulane. It was not a very complex defense. Things are a lot more complicated in the NFL, and the Buffalo Bills defensive scheme is a lot more complex, maybe more so than your average NFL defense. So Dorian Williams being in first early is a tell that maybe the Buffalo Bills do like his progress, and they clearly want him to be that guy who fills in for Matt Milano. But this is one of those ones where you might have to be patient. It might take some time. Tyrell Dodson might get the first crack because he's a veteran, because he's more comfortable in the scheme, because he's a little bit more seasoned. The Buffalo Bills do also have some reinforcements coming in. Balon Spector should be coming off IR soon. His 21-day practice window should be opening up. You have AJ Klein on the practice squad, and you still do have Traven Howard sitting at home. He has not been signed by anybody yet. He was with the Buffalo Bills all off season. He is a veteran. He started in Super Bowl for the LA Rams a couple of seasons ago. So he might be someone the Buffalo Bills look towards, or who knows? Maybe you can get Christian Kirksey to come out or coax him out of retirement. If you did do the Christian Kirksey thing, it mostly would be Christian Kirksey, the middle linebacker, and it would probably be Terrell Bernard going into that Matt Milano role. DaQuan Jones, You mentioned his season is likely over with a torn pec. Maybe he can come back for the playoffs. Everyone wants to hold out hope, but honestly, we don't know yet. There's still a lot of unanswered questions on the severity of his injury, but we know he's going to be out a long, long time. Can't stress this enough. He was having an all-pro year. I mean, he was playing at the caliber, the likes of Chris Jones, the likes of Justin Simmons, the likes of Quinnen Williams. He was having that type of an impact on this defense. That's not being hyperbolic. In this 4-game window, that is the impact he was having. And in this 5th game that he played, he literally got hurt making one of those impact plays, just blowing up the running play and taking down Travis Etienne. That's where he got hurt. That's where he tore his pec. On the roster, this is why you signed Poona Ford, obviously. It's been frustrating that he's been inactive for the first couple of weeks of the season, but he's got a clear path to playing time now, and he's obviously going to be the one activated on game day, filling in that role of one tech. What are your thoughts on how we go about filling the void left behind by DaQuan Jones?
Well, at least you have something, right? You have someone who can play that position this year. I mean, again, DaQuan was literally the best tackle in the league so far this year. This is not like trying to find a replacement for Starr, who, you know, was average, I'll say. And like, this is a guy who's playing at the top of his game, statistically, analytically, any factor you want to point to. He was one of the best in the league so far this season. And so you're not replacing him, right? You're hoping that you can find someone adequate enough to get by, right? And I think Poona Ford can be that guy. Obviously, he has been inactive, but obviously that depth that Brandon Beane went out and addressed during the offseason is now going to be tested. And you're going to have the likes of Poona Ford and Jordan Phillips and Tim Settle and obviously Ed Oliver leading that interior group now. You like to think that because you actually now had like a true sort of one tech type of backup, that's going to work out for you. And I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that's going to be as good as what DaQuan was, but at least it gives you someone with experience. It gives you someone who has been a good run defender in his career. And it's someone that like is a veteran that, you know, can come in and play, even though he's been inactive for the first several games. So it does, it in a way makes you feel good that they're using him, but obviously you don't want to use him under these circumstances. So, catch 22 there.
More poor timing for the Buffalo Bills. Eli Anku was claimed off of the Buffalo Bills practice squad by the Atlanta Falcons. So our 3rd string one tech is no longer on the roster. So if the Buffalo Bills are looking to add another beefier one tech type to the practice squad, DJ Dale, who was with the team as a UDFA all off season, he has not been picked up by anyone yet. He looked solid in training camp. It just was Eli Anku who's better. They could chase a vet in free agency for the practice squad. I'm not going to lie. I can't say that I have researched any veterans or even gone on Spot Track since yesterday to look, but there's usually always a veteran big guy like Ndamukong Suh, maybe even off the top of my head, I don't even know if he re-signed with the Eagles, that are sitting out there. And if the Buffalo Bills wanted to pursue them, the money is limited, but who knows? Maybe the Buffalo Bills could pursue a veteran for the practice squad as well, just to have some insurance behind Poona Ford. All right. My biggest takeaway from this football game was the fact the Buffalo Bills are now 3-2, right? And being 3-2 when we should be 5-0, that is what stings to me the most. And that is the biggest takeaway I have from this game, especially knowing that both losses are at the hands of a Josh Allen-led offense. Week 1, it was a Josh Allen implosion, and week 5, it was a jet-lagged offense. I don't really know what that was that we saw. I'm still trying to process it against the Jaguars. But because of our offense, due to our offense, the Buffalo Bills, they lost 2 games that they had no business losing. They should be 5-0 right now. And this stinks because we have a really tough back half of our schedule, and we needed to rack up all the wins that we could early on. Games like the Bengals, the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Chargers, and the Dolphins, all in the back half of our schedule. These 2 wins could have gone a long way in helping us have a little bit of a buffer, have a little bit of padding for when we run into that gauntlet of a back half of a schedule. So yeah, it's going to, that's my biggest takeaway was just how much that stings, losing these 2 games that we easily should have won.
Yeah, it does sting. And then, yeah, the fact that you are 3-2 and that you're now behind the Dolphins, I mean, at least it shows how important getting that win against the Dolphins is at this point, because you could very easily, had you not gone and taken care of business in that game, be 2-3 right now. But yeah, I mean, the Jags, I see people in the comment section talking about these games, just nothing goes over right. Spin says Jags are like the Jets. These games, just nothing goes right. Jags have the Bills are cursed when it comes to playing the Jags. Like, and we talked about, like, going into the pregame, like how the Bills Jags, like, last like 6-7 matchups have been alternating wins losses. They've been a tough team for the Bills to beat consistently over the years, and for whatever reason, they once again had a tough time. And the fact that they're 3-2, look, this is a big stretch coming up here for the Bills with the team. The Giants, obviously, that looks like now that's a game that the Bills absolutely have to have. Cannot lose that one. And then obviously you have some other winnable games here coming up in this stretch before you get to that gauntlet you mentioned. So you don't want to slip up again at this point if you're the Bills.
A little potpourri thing that I want to add in before we get to the rest of our takeaways from this game. The Buffalo Bills travel decision. That is something that is going to loom large over the course of the next couple of weeks, especially if this is a loss that really does come back to haunt the Buffalo Bills towards the end of the season. There's a lot of reason for fans to be outraged at the way that this football game was scheduled. Obviously, number one, there's that viral video going around of Roger Goodell speaking on the London games, calling this year's decision to keep the Jaguars in London 2 weeks back to back and experiment to see how it works out. And obviously it worked out very well for the Jaguars. Travis Etienne commenting post-game, I felt like it really created a great edge for us. Just knowing how I felt in the Falcons game, the first game that we had out here, and having the whole week out here, just being able to get to get our bodies adjusted and not having to have that jet lag on us throughout the game. I feel like it played a huge part. Despite the outrage that a lot of fans should rightfully feel about the NFL's decision to create the schedule this week, the Buffalo Bills still had to go out there and they still had to play this football game. You have to play the hands that you are dealt. And I think that McDermott is going to face a lot of heat for playing the hand the way that he did. Obviously, this is playing the results, but it appears like it was a gross miscalculation on Sean McDermott's part to fly the Bills out on Thursday night to arrive Friday morning, practice, and then hold off sleeping until sundown to try to reset your sleep schedule. Yes, the Jaguars did the same exact thing last week. Most team sports scientists are pushing them in that direction, and almost all teams are doing this now, but those teams never had to play a team who had already been in London for 2 weeks. What are your thoughts on Sean McDermott's decision to wait so long to bring the Buffalo Bills to London?
I'll be pretty short and sweet with this. Like, I would have gone earlier if it was me, knowing the situation. The sports science obviously tells you to do one thing, but I don't think that factors in the opponent and kind of what the situation is for them, right? So to me, I would have flown out Monday, probably, like early in the week. Let your bodies get adjusted over the course of several days. Like, again, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a sports scientist, but like, to me, I know when I've traveled and I've changed time zones, like that is what worked for me, right? And I'm not a football player, and I get that, but I think that they should have left Monday, the leading up to it. Like, you finish the game Sunday, you leave Monday, which is an off day, or even Tuesday, right, which is an off day, and you come back and start your normal Wednesday practice routine. Like that's what I would have done.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have my eyes on the Ravens this weekend because they play in London. And John Harbaugh was asked, because the Baltimore Ravens are leaving. They left after their game against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday. They left right after, or they left Monday morning, something like that. But they're pretty much getting there early in London. And that's different from the last time they went. The last time they
What are
went,
the Titans doing? Do we know?
I don't know what the Titans are doing, but I know that the Ravens, the last time they traveled to London previous to this, they followed the Bills model of going up on Thursday night into Friday. John Harbaugh has reversed that decision this year and asked why they're traveling so early. His response was, because it's the opposite of what we did last time, and last time it didn't work. So an all-time quote there, I think, from John Harbaugh, and it just kind of shows what a crapshoot it is. And sometimes common sense should prevail over maybe what some of these sports scientists are telling you. And maybe we should just be using our noggins and not overthinking, right? Paralysis by analysis, I think, was the issue that the Buffalo Bills ran into making that decision to travel to London so late, because the proof is in the pudding. That team looked jet lagged. I think it was Jamie Erdahl was on NFL Network the night after the game, and she was just like, the Bills players just kept looking around on the sideline for somebody to make the first move, to provide that spark, to get the whole sideline ramped back up again. And just nobody made the first move. Nobody really took the initiative to go out there and try to reset the sideline, to reset the team. And it was just a team that looked like it was not all there on Sunday, and that is unfortunate. All right, before we get to our other takeaways from the offense and the defense, a quick word from the guys over at the Cover One Buffalo podcast.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
All right, let's transition now to our takeaways, our biggest takeaways from what happened to the Buffalo Bills on offense. I think Eric already put out a great film room feature. You can check it out, not in the live video section, but in the pre-recorded video section of the Cover One YouTube channel, where he sort of broke down all the various different things that went wrong for the Buffalo Bills offense. And he opened the video with some eye-popping statistics from the game, right? Two out of the 2 3-and-outs to start the game for the Buffalo Bills, 5 drives that lasted only 4 plays. First 7 drives ended with only 1 or 0 first downs. They did not score until there was 1 minute and 19 seconds left in the second quarter with that Stefon Diggs touchdown. They squandered an attempt to double dip, or an opportunity, I should say, to double dip coming out of the half. That would have given them a lead, and they didn't score again until they were down 2 scores late in the fourth quarter with the Jacksonville Jaguars playing prevent defense. What are your general thoughts on the Buffalo Bills' jet-lagged offense and the performance that they put on Sunday?
Yeah, I think this is one of those games where if you look at the box score statistics, it's a bit misleading, right? You look at it and you see like, oh, Josh Allen, 359 passing yards, like a season high for him. The Bills still end up with like 388 total yards of offense. But then you dive in a little deeper into those statistics that you mentioned. You look at the time of possession in this game. The Bills only had just under 22 minutes in time of possession. That is a huge disparity in an NFL game, right? We talked about earlier in the season when the Bills dominated time of possession against Washington, when they had over 40 minutes of possession, and the Jaguars had almost 40 minutes of possession in this game. It was very, I would say it had the opposite feel of prior games, where you felt like there was like a deliberate game plan, a concerted effort to keep the run game going, even if it struggled early. And we saw this against like Washington and the Raiders, right? Bills a little slow out of the gates with the run game, kept with it. This game, no commitment to the run. Didn't seem like there was really a plan on offense. No utilizations of the tight ends, as we are going to get to in a moment. And I'm sure you're going to go up those cards here in a second. And it just seemed like not only were the players kind of looking to each other to figure out like is anyone gonna make a move, but like there was no, I don't know, it just felt like there was no energy behind the game plan, no energy in the execution. It just felt like Stefon Diggs to me was like the only guy, and yeah, sure, Josh Allen, but it seemed like Stefon Diggs was the only guy really who came ready to play, and Gabe Davis to an extent, but man, it can't be like that every single week. So between the lack of execution, lack of game plan, I would say some of the play calling seemed very interesting to me. I'll say that 2nd and 1 where you throw that kind of like toss out to James Cook on the right rather than like just kind of getting that first down in a game where like you've been struggling to get first downs. Like, why make it harder on yourself? Like, those are the kind of things that add up and frustrated me. So I think overall, this is one of those, you cannot look at the box score. Everyone in this comment section who watched the game knows that the offense struggled mightily in this game. 3 touchdowns, obviously, at the end. But like you said, 2 didn't come until they were down by 2 scores.
Yeah, I mean, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they shut down the Buffalo Bills running backs. Bills rushing outside of Josh Allen, 10 carries for 15 yards. That's 1.5 yards per carry. Absolutely non-existent. They tackled well. They bottled up every passing attempt underneath. They blanketed the middle of the field. I'm going to put up Josh Allen's next gen stats, his passing chart here. Sorry, Dave, I'm going to cover your face. A blank canvas practically in the middle of the field. The Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen targeted and put an emphasis on outside of the hashes. There was really either there was no effort to, or there was an inability to, for some reason, attack the Jacksonville Jaguars over the middle of the football field. As you can see from this passing chart of Josh Allen in this football game, they blanketed, the Jacksonville Jaguars did, the middle of the field. All the Bills' damage was done on the outside of the hashes, deep left and right. It's simply just not a sustainable game plan. The Buffalo Bills were dictated to. They did not do the dictating. And number one, that starts up front, right? The offensive line had their worst game of the season. They look like the offensive line of old for a little bit up there, the way that they were just getting manhandled by the Jacksonville Jaguars. And number two, and this is not me trying to excuse the Buffalo Bills' execution errors, because there were execution errors. But at the end of the day, to me, this is also a product of coaching, and this is a product of game plan. It took way too long to adjust, in my opinion, to what the Jacksonville Jaguars were doing. It took the Buffalo Bills way too long to change up what they were doing. They didn't really start clicking again until the prevent defense of the fourth quarter. You mentioned Exhibit A, that pitch to James Cook on 2nd and 1 when you should just be picking up that first down, gaining some momentum. It's little things like that that really, I think, stymied the Buffalo Bills in this football game. You got to give the Jacksonville Jaguars their flower, but where are you really placing the blame on this one? Is it the players? Is it the coaches? Like, what combination? Obviously, everyone's really at fault, but where are you putting a lot of your blame on this one for the offense?
Man, I think it didn't think ahead to think of what percentages this would be, but I think let's just split it evenly between the coaching and the players. I think like this was Ken Dorsey's worst game of the year. I think. I mean, like in my mind, this was worse than the Jets game. I think the Jets game is week 1. That Jets defense, whatever, right? But like you've kind of gotten into a rhythm now over the last 2 to 3 games if you're Ken Dorsey, and then all of a sudden, like, seemed like you forgot how to, script the early parts of the game. Steve comes in. Dorsey doesn't study the style and rules of opposing defensive coaches. Everyone knows the Jags stack the box and leave the middle open. Just look at tight end numbers. Yeah, and the Jags coming into this game, which is why I said on my pregame as well, like I was like touting your hot take. Basically, I was like, Steve's going to be right here one of these days, and it's going to be like the Kincaid and Knox show. The Jags this year had not been good at defending the tight end per DVOA and per raw statistics. They hadn't been good at defending the tight end, and the Bills did not take advantage of that. And as you showed on the passing chart, they did not attack the middle of the field at all. So I think start with Ken Dorsey. And yes, there were some execution issues, but at the end of the day, Josh Allen didn't get sacked in this game. So ultimately, the pass protection held up okay. The run blocking was probably the worst that we've seen It was definitely a struggle for guys like Torrance, and like he's going to have his ups and downs, obviously. But I think you start with Ken Dorsey. I'd probably give him like 65% of the blame, and then the rest maybe on the players. Like I would probably lean towards giving more blame on the coaching in this game than the players.
Yeah, the offensive line didn't give up a sack, but lots of simulated and creeper pressures. That's what the Jacksonville Jaguars utilized. Allen was pressured on 13 of 43 dropbacks. And when Josh Allen was under pressure in this football game, he was 3 of 12 for 24 yards and an interception. That is very unlike Josh Allen. Josh Allen is usually a pretty good quarterback while being pressured. But this game, the Jacksonville Jaguars were able to not only pressure him on those 13 plays, but they were really successful when they did get pressure to Josh Allen. Now, at the end of the day, 13 of 43 dropbacks. That leaves 30 other dropbacks where the Jacksonville Jaguars did not create pressure on Josh Allen, and the Buffalo Bills were still not able to really do anything meaningful outside of the last 2 minutes of the first half and the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. And that's really unacceptable. And I that's why, like, again, I think number one, my biggest blame goes to the offensive line. Like, I really do. They set the tone, and they set an awful tone. Both we were never able to get our run game going. And again, I feel like even in pass protection, Josh Allen was still 3 batted balls in this game, right? Like there was still a lot of pressure on him to get the ball out quick. I did not like the offensive line in this game, but at the same time, I also do feel like we should have gone tempo quicker. I know we only ran the ball 10 times with the traditional running back, but even then, I think that was like too much in this game. I mean, I feel like after the first couple of drives, man, we should have just gone into a 2-minute offense for the whole game. Like that's really where we were just so freaking stagnant. And they created so much structure around Josh Allen, and it's worked so well for these last couple of games. But I really feel like they should have maybe taken some of that structure away and just let Josh be Josh for a little bit in this game, because they had to do something. Nothing was clicking for this football team outside the last couple of minutes of each half. Nothing. It was an awful, awful showing from this offense. Despite all that, right? Josh Allen, Stefon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, they were still able to help my fantasy team. So I do appreciate that. Allen went 20. If we're taking any positives away from this game, Allen 27 of 40, 67% completion percentage, threw for 2 touchdowns, ran for another. Diggs 8, 121 and a tutty. Davis 6 for 100 and a touchdown. Diggs' day could have looked a lot different though, right? In the third quarter.
Couple underthrows.
Yeah. In the third quarter, Allen hit him on a deep ball, but if he hit him in stride, it's a touchdown. I think we would have taken the lead at that point, because I still think it was an 11-7 game at that point. And then in the fourth quarter, Allen says the ball slipped out of his hands, and that why it was underthrown, but it was still a 50-50 ball to Diggs right at the goal line. Diggs lost that 50-50 jump ball battle, resulted in an interception. That was 14 points right there. This is another reason why this game is so frustrating to me, right? 2 plays this game, and things turn out totally different if they are executed properly. The Bills just left themselves with such little margin for error because they could find no consistency on offense.
Yeah, and I think that is the key point, right? There was like almost no margin for error in another game, like where things are maybe going a bit differently. Maybe you don't even you don't even talk about these things. There have been other plays, right? Like there was a play in the Miami game where Josh Allen hit Gabe Davis down the right seam and he underthrew him and he caught the ball and it was fine and like it was great. We didn't really talk about that being an underthrow because the offense was humming otherwise, right? But in this situation, it's a bit different, right? You talk about these underthrows, and I think, who said it? I think Monkey Business said Josh Allen played okay. Like Josh Allen, really, he was generally okay. I thought, it wasn't really him. I would say that was the issue. And there were some drops. I think Knox had a drop as well. And granted, it was there were some tough throws. Gabe Davis had a drop, and I get it. Like you got these guys statistically so far this year had been great. Like we talk about, like, oh, maybe it was Gabe Davis's only first or second drop of the year, but like, okay, like that's fine. But like in that moment, he still needed to make that play. Like I hate making excuses like that just because up to that point he hadn't dropped any balls this year. Like that's not. I don't want to give him a pass because he hadn't dropped any balls before. If he drops one now, like it's not like you get a hopper of drops that you're like comfortable with, right? And so that's frustrating to me. And the margin of error thing, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. That to me is what it felt like all game. Like we were battling uphill all game, playing from behind, playing like if we didn't score or didn't, like it just felt like with the way the injuries were mounting up on defense that it was maybe going to be even more pressure on the Bills offense. And that's kind of what it turned out to be.
Steve Lane comes in with a great comment. He says, Jacksonville did not respect our weapons, run after the catch, and they are right. Allen's passing yards after the catch, the lowest in the league this week. So that's definitely an issue the Buffalo Bills have to address. Monkey Business comes in and says, hey, they didn't even score after Stefon Diggs caught that bomb.
No,
he's correct.
They did.
Carl Tolman coming in saying, why don't we run Harrison Murray early in the game to soften up the defense for Cook? And why is Josh not under center most of the time, as Josh thrives in play action from under center? I'll say this. I will say this. The Buffalo Bills, they're a shotgun team. They will always be a shotgun team. That's not going to change. That's what most of the National Football League is now. However, the Buffalo Bills have had so much success from under center this season, especially utilizing the play action. I can pull up the statistics here. Give me a second. Eric Turner did all the hard work for me, pulled it up. Bills under center play action stats. They have 24 dropbacks this year utilizing play action, 11th in the NFL. They've attempted 23 passes out of play action, 10th in the NFL. They've had 20 completions, 3rd in the NFL. That shows just how efficient they have been. They are 1st in yards with 424. They are 4th with 2 touchdowns off of play action. Your yards per play action attempt, 18.4. EPA per dropback, 1.25, which is 1st in the National Football League. 26 passes in total from under center this year. Are the Buffalo Bills going to change who they are philosophically and just be under center for a majority of the football game? No. Should they? No. But should they be utilizing under center, and should they be utilizing under center play action more, especially with those 2 tight ends that they got? I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. And I think that's coaching as well, right? I think you got to understand the opponent, understand how they're scheming against you defensively. Pops, that's the question. Why does the offense seem to struggle more against the 3-4 than the 4-3? And I don't know if it's necessarily about even or odd fronts. I think it's more about the back end, to be honest, and whether teams are utilizing more like cover 0 versus, cover 2 shell, like boxes. Like there's a lot that goes into that. And I think just some of this is on, some of this is Josh Allen's better against certain defenses. I get that. But this is also like the dictating thing that you mentioned, right? Like sometimes as an offense, you need to dictate the terms of the defense, even if it puts you out of your quote normal base package on offense, which is like the Bills shotgun, right? So I'd like to see a little bit more of that as well. As you said, like obviously they're not going to go fully to that because that just doesn't make sense. But like situationally, game plan specific, maybe that's something where they can figure out the right spots to do it. And this seemed like a spot to do it.
James come with a super chat. I always appreciate your guys' super chat. He says, hey guys, are you sick of shotgun draw to Cooks over and over again? Most useless play Dorsey keeps doing. Arg. I'll keep that up for a second here. And to me, I like the play call, but you're right. I don't like how often we use it. And this just kind of goes back to my original point. Like the offensive line did not win at the line of scrimmage in this football game. And if the offensive line did a better job in this football game, got a better push in this football game, with how good Josh Allen is throwing the football, this play should work more often than not. But I think the Buffalo Bills are going to the well to it a little bit too much.
I do. And the film guys will point out that it has worked at times, but it also hasn't worked a lot of times. So we need to kind of really can't just like highlight out the good ones, right? There's plenty of bad ones here too. And I think it's not even just about the play, right? It's about like when it's used. And to me, that's been an issue, I think, as well as like timing of this play when it happens in games. And it isn't even just that. It's like that pitch, like we mentioned earlier, like it's like the timing of some of these plays to me is part of the issue as well. So like, I don't hate this play in a vacuum. But I think for me, the thing that frustrates me is I feel like they don't know when to use it. And I think like they almost feel like, oh, we're going to use it now because they're not expecting it. But in reality, it's like the defense knows like they're going to try to use this now because they think we're not expecting it and they're ready for it. So it's like, it's kind of like a backwards thought process. But Walter comes in and says, I'm sick of the delayed handoff for runs. The Bills love running it. Yeah, they really do. They really do.
We were speaking on consistency earlier and how the Buffalo Bills could not find any consistency on offense. Speaking of consistency, this is a conversation that we could have probably had sooner in previous weeks, but it's hard to justify having said conversation when your team is scoring points and winning, right? This week, they didn't score a lot of points and they didn't win. And that leaves the door open for us to have this conversation. And that conversation is the usage of the tight ends through 5 weeks, which if I'm looking for one adjective to describe it, I would say woof. Like it has not been great. Dalton Kincaid's usage has dropped every single week. It was 79% in week 1, down to 53% in week 5. Now he did have to leave the game for a little bit to go get checked for concussion, came back into the game. Now he's back in concussion protocol. That is something to monitor over the course of the week. But through the season, Dalton Kincaid has 17 catches for 118 yards. Dawson Knox has 11 catches for 75 yards, way below most of the league in catches and yards for these two tight ends. Ken Dorsey. Last year, he was unable to properly implement and involve Dawson Knox. We had conversation after conversation after conversation about how Dawson Knox needed to be more involved in the Buffalo Bills offense. Ken Dorsey this year, seemingly unable to implement and involve Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox in this Buffalo Bills offense. The Bills were dreadful versus the Jaguars in their ability to get the ball over the middle of the field. We showed you guys the next gen passing chart. The Bills have been dreadful this year getting the ball into the hands of their tight ends and getting them involved in any way other than being an outlet pass. Last year, we heard all of the excuses with Nyheim Hines. This offense is very complex and it takes time. That was the big one. That's the big excuse that we got. And honestly, right now, like F time. If we need to simplify the shit out of this offense, that's what we need to do, right? This should not be happening to a tight end that you paid $10+ million to and another that you traded up for in the first round. What are your thoughts on Ken Dorsey and his inability to get Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid properly involved in this offense?
Well, it's trending the wrong way, right? Because I think the first two games, it seemed like he was doing an okay job in getting Kincaid involved, right? I mean, I think we always figured like there was going to be, each of them were going to be eating into each other's production, right? So if you kind of look at the fact that like even collectively, like as a pair, right, the production is kind of below the league average, if you will. So you go back to the first game, right? So against the Jets, 4 targets for Kincaid, 6 targets in the game against the Raiders, and then only 2 against the Commanders, 5 targets in the game against the Dolphins, and then only 2 again in this last game. So, I mean, if you take a look at that, that's 9 targets over the last 3 games, and one of those was a game of 5 targets. So, like, I get it. Like, he's a rookie, and I get, like, they're trying to still kind of figure it out. But, like, Ken Dorsey had a chance to figure this out last year. First half of the season, struggled getting Dawson Knox the ball, maybe turned a corner in the second half of the season, and Knox did start picking up his production in the second half of 2022. But now it seems like in 2023, we're kind of like back to where we were at the beginning of 2022. And that's the thing I think that frustrates people the most, is like maybe the regression of the usage, right? Because it wasn't like, okay, Knox stunk at the first half of 2022 because he wasn't getting utilized properly. Ken Dorsey made some changes, and all of a sudden, like, it wasn't elite production, but it was like better production. And now we're kind of like back to what it's seeming like is regressing back to essentially not utilizing them at all. And it's unfortunate because in this game, again, this would have been an opportunity to use that matchup, and it didn't happen. So
the Buffalo Bills have a coach sitting around in Mike Shula, who was the offensive play caller in Carolina when they had Greg Olsen, Jeremy Shockey. They utilized a lot of 2 tight end stuff. And I mean, if I'm Sean McDermott, like I'm sitting Mike Shula down and being like, here's your homework assignment, right? Like over the next couple of weeks, we need you going out and figuring out how these 2 guys were utilized in Carolina. And you need to work with Ken to get these guys more implemented in the offense, not just as outlet guys, but down the freaking field, down the seam, over the middle, whatever it takes. The Buffalo Bills, I'm sorry, but like, I get it. Like, and it's tough. Like I said previously, it's tough to criticize the offense when it's humming, but right now this looks like it's going to be 2 things could be the Achilles heel of this football team this year on offense. Number 1 is when the offensive line doesn't show up to run block. That's going to be a problem. Like they need to be more consistent. They need to show up like they did the first 4 weeks. So right now, the way they showed up last week is just an anomaly. Let's hope that doesn't become a consistency, because if we don't have that balance, I think we're going to struggle a little bit. That's number 1. But the second Achilles heel of this football team is going to be our inability to utilize and get the football over the middle of the football field to slot receivers, to tight ends, whoever it is. The Buffalo Bills, I think, really, really, really need to work on that over the next couple of weeks. All right, on to the defense now. And I just want to start by saying, like, flowers to this defense, man. Flowers to this defense. All the injuries that they endured, not just last week, but over the course of the early parts of the game this week. And they kept this a 1-score game until the middle of the 4th quarter. They gave the Buffalo Bills offense every opportunity to take the game over, and they just never did.
Yep. And the fact of the matter is like injuries piled up, and it was early in the game too. It wasn't like these injuries happened late in the game and like the defense was at full strength for, 90-95% of the games. Probably the opposite, honestly. Like the defense wasn't at full strength for 90% of this game, and they kept this team in it. And look, I know they gave up a ton of yards on the ground. We're going to get to the next topic, officiating, and I'm going to have some comments on that. But we know they gave up a ton of yards on the ground, but ultimately for most of the day, they bent but didn't break, right? Made really some crucial takeaways when they needed to, especially the one AJ Epinesa, the takeaway right before the end of the half, right when the Bills scored. That was looking like the Jags were going to really, fuck over the double dip potential there by scoring so quickly before the half, and they didn't.
Trevor Lawrence turned the ball over twice in the red zone. Twice
in the red zone. So there were some really positive moments for this defense, especially for guys like Ed Oliver, AJ Epinesa, and I thought Dane Jackson as well played a solid game, right? Now, there were some issues, but at the end of the day, you still really, you gave up 25 points, but in reality, for most of the day, you had pretty much kind of like eliminated the huge play, and you kind of had limited the Jags offensively for 3.5 quarters, right? Etienne scores those 2 later touchdowns, but like, got to give the defense credit. Mentally battled through, like overcoming, seeing some of their stars leave the field. Claude says the defense was gritty, but they weren't good. Yes, there was like,
you needed someone to force those 2 turnovers, right? So
yeah, I mean, yeah, I get it. Like the Jags were really good on 3rd down. They got 4 first downs from penalty as well. So, and they were 10 for 18 on 3rd down as well. So I get that, right? And like at the end of the day, you did give up almost 200 rushing yards. So I understand that, but points, ultimately the defense did enough for an offense as good as the Bills to win this game. So individual efforts we can criticize, and we rightfully should criticize some individual efforts, but overall as a unit, I thought it was an admirable and valiant job, right? Came up short, but like I'll call it a valiant effort.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the positives from this game, AJ Epinesa, 6 pressures, 4 hurries, 2 sacks, 3 batted balls. He's one of the league leaders in like pass deflections, like up there with like cornerbacks and stuff, people who are throwing the ball at a lot. So AJ Epinesa had himself the best game of his career in a game where they needed him to have one of the best games of his career. Kingsley Jonathan looked really good. 3 pressures, 2 hurries, and a sack. Leonard Floyd had 2 sacks. Ed Oliver, again, I mean, even once DaQuan Jones went down, he still delivered with guys like Jordan Phillips and Tim Settle next to him. 4 pressures, a hurry, 2 hits, and a sack. And then Terrell Bernard, 2 pressures, a hurry, a sack, 16 tackles. 8 of them were solo, 8 assisted. The front 6, not the front 7 anymore, sadly, because Matt Milano is out for the season, they're going to be just fine.
Yeah, I mean, they're fine. I think, obviously, no DaQuan Jones, but the depth there, they're going to get Greg Rousseau back. They're going to get Von Miller, like, obviously back to a more game-ready type of shape, right? Like, so if there's any unit that can kind of absorb a loss like that, it's the front 7. And really, like, guys like AJ Epinesa are playing above expectation, I think, in like contract year for him. So I saw Greg Tom Set come on Twitter today and say, give him 3 for 24. And I'll be like, I'm kind of cool with that. Like,
if he'll take it,
I'm kind of cool with that. Like, before the season, you'd have been like, no way.
Yeah.
So it's how times change, right? How times change. But yeah, again, they did an admirable job. And a couple of those touchdowns that the Jags did score, right? Like the Zay Jones catch was just like a perfectly thrown ball by Trevor Lawrence. Like, I know some people were upset with like Dane Jackson there, but how can you really be upset on that play? So
I wasn't.
I wasn't either.
Yeah.
So
when you look at Dane Jackson's day, 5 targets, 3 catches, only 30 yards, and obviously that touchdown, which was just really good coverage. It was just a great play by Zay Jones. But on the other hand, you have Kyer Elam, targeted 8 times, allowed 6 catches for 93 yards. He was absolutely worked all day by Calvin Ridley. The Buffalo Bills were even playing a lot of man coverage, which kind of like works to Kyer Elam's strong suit, and he was still getting worked over by the likes of Calvin Ridley. Was this a game for Kyer Elam where he showed exactly why he was inactive, or is him being inactive the past couple of weeks what led to his poor play because he was rusty? Where do you sit in this a debate that is ablaze on social media?
I don't know that we'll ever really know, but I think the former. I think this is why he was inactive.
I agree.
I mean, look, you're a professional football player. You're a first round pick. You have tons of talent. You have tons of athleticism. You've been at training camp. You know, you were at training camp this year, last year. You got playing time last year. Pretty significant playing time in the second half of your rookie year. Like, I think it's an indicative of his play. I don't think it's a rust thing of him not playing the first couple games. I think this is just what it is. And then you see the Bills go out and they sign Josh Norman. Not that I expect Josh Norman's going to be like on the 53 immediately, but man, like the Bills are desperate if they're going out and bringing Josh Norman back into the building. So look, they need a veteran, I guess, to come in and kind of be a presence there. And Ralph Wilson Sr. says Elam looked jet lagged in training camp. So, that's.
I'll tell you what, man. Like, the thing about Elam is it just looks like the Buffalo Bills were. I don't know what they were thinking, right? They traded up for Kyer Elam after Trent McDuffie got stolen. I think Trent McDuffie was their guy, and the Chiefs jumped the Bills and they took Trent McDuffie, and then it honestly is now looking like the Buffalo Bills panicked. They traded up, they drafted Kyer Elam, who most people thought was a second round draft pick, first round caliber athlete, Kyer Elam, 100%. And the Buffalo Bills probably sat down with him at Lucas Oil Field and had that conversation. He pulled out his notebook and they were all impressed because he was a processy type dude. And they were like, well, processy type dude combined with freakish athlete, maybe we'll reach because he's the best corner left on the board and we really need a corner. But they were sold a bag of goods and he has not delivered, it looks like, through the first year and a half, because it looks like he's just, for some reason, there's an inability for him to match and combine that athleticism and that preparation with what occurs on the football field.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I forgot who made the comment earlier, hating seeing guys that the Bills have drafted go to other teams and flourish. BFL
Zach Moss.
Elam got to be a long-term investment. The talent was there. Got to pray it takes time. But like the Bills aren't going to give him this is year 2. He's not going to probably get his 5th-year option picked up at this rate if this continues, right? And then you're going to eat it for 2 more years. subpar play, if there's no improvement, like that's a tough pill to swallow, right? I think that's a tough pill to swallow. And then Mattis Center says Elam needs to change. Too much baggage at the Bills. He'll be traded and do very well.
It wouldn't shock me, and that's the other thing. Like, they drafted a man-to-man corner, and we all got excited as fans. The Buffalo Bills are going to play more to man-to-man. They're going to be aggressive. They're going to be, and they just haven't done that either. Sean McDermott has just fallen back into like the zone type of ways, and they really haven't utilized Kyer Elam to a strong suit. Now they did against the Jaguars, right? They played a lot of man-to-man coverage, but just frustrating, man. And then I saw the Josh Norman news today, and I literally laughed. I laughed. Like, I get it. Like, there's so many people on social media who are going to be like, oh, it's just a practice squad signing. Who cares? I thought Uber had a great comment today. Let me pull it up. You know, he just did the Cover One roundup. His comment was to the Josh Norman signing. Josh Norman isn't coming to the Bills to be a starting cornerback. Josh Norman is coming to the Bills as a player who has perfected Sean McDermott's scheme and as a break glass in case of emergency option, even as a mentor at one Bills drive. So that's a great take, right? Like, this dude's never going to see the football field. They just want another veteran in the room. They have some young guys. They want to coach them up. Last time I checked, like, Trey White could still be there though, with a torn Achilles. He can still be in the meeting rooms. He can still be a part of this football team. You have a guy on the street in Casey Hayward who is younger and probably has more left in the tank. Who knows? Maybe he doesn't want to come here and start on the practice squad and not be guaranteed a spot in the starting lineup with what the Buffalo Bills have. You also had like Cam Dantzler sitting on the street. You have Greedy Williams sitting on the street. I just feel like the Buffalo Bills had more options. This was just a weird signing to me.
This signing just reeks of familiarity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like familiarity over potential. I guess if they figure like whoever they signed isn't gonna really play anyway, maybe.
Yeah.
They figure those guys aren't capable of being on the active roster, then that's why they go with a guy who can just be in the room. And I get like the Trey White thing, but maybe he's going to be doing like rehab and things like that. So it's going to be harder for him to kind of be in those rooms potentially. So I somewhat understand that, but yeah, when we look at it from a roster construction standpoint, it's always tough seeing potentially guys out there who are more talented and younger that are passed up on in favor of a guy like Josh Norman. And it's really hard to quantify the value, right? Like, how can you quantify or transpose like what he brings in the meeting rooms to the field? That's the thing I think that is hard, right? Because it's like you can't really quantify it. So it just becomes one of those things where you're like, we just have to assume like he's helping them out, right?
Yeah, Walter S. comes in and says, why? And this is a great comment. This kind of goes back to Elam a little bit. He says, why doesn't the team get a jet lag excuse, but Elam, who is also getting his first start of the season lining up against the Jags wide receiver 1, why does he not get the jet lag excuse? He was horrible, but can we give the guy more than 8 games? Yeah, I agree. Like, I don't think there are so many people on social media who are like, trade. We should go trade for Marcus Peters. We should go trade for Patrick Surtain. We should go trade for, Frankie Louvu. We should go trade for Andrew Billings. There are so many people who want to make trades and they want to restock the cupboards of this football team by trading away future assets. I'm not there yet, right? To me, it is DaQuan Jones is out. Poona Ford is in. It is Matt Milano is out. Dorian Williams and Tyrell Dodson are in. And the same at corner. I think Benford's going to step back into the starting lineup when he's ready. I think that Dane Jackson is going to be the starter opposite them. But if one of those two guys gets dinged again, you're probably going to see Kyer Elam start. And he's going to have more opportunities to show what he can do. I don't think you're going to see any point in the season where he becomes inactive again. I don't think you're going to see the Buffalo Bills add from the outside in any significant way unless one of these guys goes down in the next few weeks before the trade deadline with a serious injury. I really don't think you're going to see the Buffalo Bills really adding another name here. So Walter S., I think you're going to get your wish. Like, yeah, we're being hard on him now, but I do think he'll have a chance to prove, mostly because the Buffalo Bills really don't have any other choice, that he can improve and get better.
Yeah, I mean that's just the reality, right? He's gonna have to, and yeah, Benford being back is probably gonna be, it will eat into his playing time, which is I think a good thing for the team. Maybe not a good thing for him personally, but he'll have his chances still, right? I mean, he still will have his chances, and yes, it was a tough assignment for his first game being active, and I get all those factors. So look, I'm not writing him off by any means yet, but certainly wasn't a great
Yeah.
first game by any means. So we'll see.
Charles G coming in the great comment says Brandon Bean filled the cupboard last year. Thankfully, yeah. I mean, credit to Brandon Bean too. With all of these injuries, I do think the Buffalo Bills have a chance to weather them. DaQuan Jones out, Poona Ford in, Matt Milano out. You have a 3rd round pick in Dorian Williams. You have another guy in Tyrell Dodson who's been here for years to fill in. You saw it this week. Gregory Rousseau out. You have a 2nd round pick in AJ Epinesa who's able to step in, finally starting to click because you had Leonard Floyd on the other side. You added in free agency this year. Trey White goes down. You have Dane Jackson, who started games in this league. You have Christian Benford, who's clicked so far. And then you have a 1st round pick in Kyrie Elam. So the Buffalo Bills had a lot of depth on this defense. That depth is being tested. And because of some of these injuries, that depth is now gone because the depth are now starters. But kudos to Brandon Bean for having guys who are capable or capable-ish of filling in at some of these positions. And we'll see how they do as the weeks progress. One last thing I want to hit on, and Dave, I want your thoughts on this. I'm not willing to make any definitive statements yet because I do think that these guys are still 2 very, very good football players in the National Football League. And I'm not going to pretend to be a big enough expert to tell you that, or to tell the viewers that these guys have like fallen off a cliff or anything like that. And that's not what I'm saying, but Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, they're still very, very good football players, but maybe they look like they've lost a little bit. Maybe I don't want to say lost a step, but maybe lost a half step. And I think that might be something to monitor as the season goes along, because especially now with Trey White gone, with Matt Milano gone, the Buffalo Bills are going to need playmakers and difference makers on this defense. Do Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer still have what it is in the left, have enough left in the tank to be difference making type of guys on this defense?
I think they can. I think they can still in spots, right? I think the all pro days are probably over. I know it wasn't that long ago where they were, but and I think Micah Hyde has generally looked fairly solid so far this year. I think Poyer's the one you look at and you're like, maybe he's lost a little bit more. Maybe that injury is still bothering him a bit. We don't know, but look, these guys are aging vets, right? This is going to happen to these guys eventually. However, they're still both super smart players. They are still very, like, their communication with each other and with the rest of the defense is still top notch. So all the positives from that front, I think ultimately still an asset to the defense. And I also think like we've been spoiled with how good they have been as a tandem over the years. So in a way, like maybe they are still playing at a really high level, and it's just like we're so used to them being that all pro tandem that it's a little bit tougher to see, like when maybe we're seeing them maybe lose a half a step or not play quite as splashy as we have seen them in the past. Although Mike Hyde does have 2 picks this year, so
and that's why I said just like something to monitor, right? Like it's not something like you said. I think they're still very, very, very good football players, but are they the elite difference makers anymore? I think that should be something that we question a little bit. And Taylor Rapp had 0 snaps against the Jacksonville Jaguars on defense. Yep. Even when Teron Johnson went out with injury, it was Cam Lewis that came in the slot. So it'll be really interesting to see how Taylor Rapp fits in over the course of the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, etc. Because he's a guy who might be a part of this team's future. I know he's on a 1-year deal, so it'll be interesting to see if we can find more ways to get him onto the football field. All right, before we get to some of our final thoughts on things like officiating, artificial turf, and looking ahead at the New York Giants, this show, as always, is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it is just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, the Buffalo Bills. This is normally the point where we talk about special teams. I guess I'll summarize special teams this way this week, right? Tyler Bass, good. Sam Martin, either really good or bad. There's no in between with Sam Martin in the way he punts the football. So we're going to sort of skip over our special teams talk this week because there were some other topical issues over the course of the week. that I wanted to talk about here. And I want to start with NFL officiating, making themselves the stars of the show Sunday morning. In total, the Bills had 11 penalties, some of them pretty questionable. Also, some questionable ball spotting as well, like that Dalton Kincaid play. I thought he picked up the first down. And it really felt like they played a role in killing some of the potential chances for momentum for the Buffalo Bills throughout the game. What were your thoughts on officiating?
Frustrating, super frustrating. And it's like, at the end of the day, 20 penalties, right? Or 19 between the two teams, 11 on the Bills. Untimely, obviously. I mean, some of them were valid. The Ed Oliver hands to the face. We got the view from the all 22. It was valid. I mean, the broadcast was awful at replaying plays with penalties, by the way. So that also added into the frustration, I think, for fans, because normally what you go through in a game, there's penalties. The broadcast will replay it, and then you can pretty much say, like, yes, that's valid, or no, it's not. And you can kind of move on from that, right? Usually. And yes, you can get frustrated if it's a bad call, whatever. But in the situation where there's so many penalties and you're not ever getting to see a replay to know like whether they were real or not, or like valid or not, that adds to the level of frustration. And then on top of that, one of the biggest things that I get frustrated with when it comes to flags and penalties is the crew taking so long on each flag to announce it and just moving on, right? Like this crew was having a conference after every flag was thrown, and it felt like it was just like a conference, like an Ed Hockley-esque day where it was like a conference after every flag, and then we get the announcement like a minute later. And that was also frustrating. So when you have so many penalties and it's taking the crew so long to announce them, it just stacks the frustration more and more. And so, I hate penalties, but at least call them quickly. That takes one variable of frustration out of play for me, and they didn't do that either. So, man.
BFLO Mafia News comes in and says, so unprofessional on that 2 touchdowns for Gabe. Apparently, the explanation from Rich Eisen was they threw the flag, but picked it up so quickly, and then the crowd was so loud that they couldn't hear the officials call the rub route or the offensive pass interference on Dalton Kincaid that they called. Like literally, the flag came out of nowhere. We're all celebrating. It reminded me of the Denver Broncos game from a couple of years ago. We played that Vic Fangio defense where we had to score a touchdown like 4 times before it finally counted because the Buffalo Bills kept getting penalties. That's what it felt like because we then threw another touchdown pass to Gabe Davis. That time it counted. And there was another situation in the game too. Like Osiris Torrance had those 2 holding penalties in a row. And I'm not going to say that those 2 holding penalties weren't holding, even though the lack of a replay from the NFL Network didn't help. They showed one of the 2. But to me, Osiris Torrance was just doing what he saw Evan Ingram doing on that Travis Etienne touchdown when Travis Etienne pulled Tyrell Dotson to the ground. So again, just completely one-sided in the way in which they called that football game. And RG Melville points out it felt like Sean Smith just threw the flag out there and tried to figure things out after he threw the flag. It was getting
That's what it felt like.
A little ridiculous out there. All right, before we move on, missed a super chat earlier, so I want to apologize for that. But we got Carl Tillman coming in saying, how long till Von Miller gets back into football shape? Yeah, he was invisible in that game, like hardly ever played. I thought at one point the Bills might get desperate and start playing him a little bit more with all the injuries that they sustained. They did not. I think this is something that could take him upwards of a month to really get back and get cooking.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's why it was important to get him active, though, in this game, right? I think it wasn't like he was going to come back day 1, game 1, and be like all pro Von Miller, right? I think it was important. Get him his rotation in, get him his snaps. Don't put too much expectation on him for this first game back and kind of let him work up to it, right? And I think for me, that's why I was happy overall that he was active for the game, because I want him to kind of stack these games in this part of the schedule being active, so that by the time we do hit that second half really stretch run of the schedule, he's in game shape, really in good game shape by then. And I don't think it'll take him too long, couple games to get there.
One last thing to talk about here. Teron Johnson had some strong words for the field turf in Tottenham after the game, saying it was a joke. that field needs to be replaced. And the most frustrating thing of all is that real grass exists in that stadium. They literally took the real grass out, put artificial turf in to play that game, all because probably the NFL was unwilling to pony up the extra money to convince Tottenham to have their grass torn up. I mean, it's frustrating. Teams like Tottenham, Real Madrid, right? Teams like Manchester United, they come stateside and grass is put in for them in like turf fields so they can play on grass because those teams are willing to pony up the money to do so. So our turf becomes grass for them. But when we go over there, our grass becomes turf because the NFL, a billions of dollar a year industry, is cheapskating and putting the players in harm's way. That is super frustrating. The year is 2023. There should be no NFL football stadiums and no field an NFL game is played on where the turf should be artificial. The proof is in the pudding. Players are getting hurt left and right. Star players are getting hurt left and right. Over the course of the last 2 years, the Bills have lost Trey White, Von Miller, Trey White again, and Matt Milano, all due to shitty turf. It is frustrating.
Yeah, not to mention we saw a couple other scares, right? We saw Kingsley Jonathan with a scare. I'm not sure exactly if that was turf related, but and there were a couple others.
Taron Johnson.
Taron Johnson, yeah, it was the other. So Jags fans snapping back saying like, hey, like you're complaining about the turf. Like, look,
they lost St. Jones in that game too to the turf.
Exactly.
They lost another player whose name I'm blanking on.
So, and it's not just this game in isolation, right? That's the problem. Is it's like it's a trend, and the NFL does not seem to be caring too much. The Bills turf is probably the best, still not as safe as grass. Yeah, I mean the field turf stuff is better, and that's fine. It's more like grass.
Yeah,
this was different.
At the end of the day, too, like, have you seen Nissan Stadium in Nashville too? They had grass and they replaced it with turf, and their turf looks like it's from like they got it from like the 1980s Astrodome. Like the turf in the new Nissan field looks awful, like aesthetically unpleasing. That cannot be something comfortable to play on. The year is 2023. And here's the thing, like we can sit here and we can complain about all we want. The NFL is never going to do anything about it because like we're going to watch anyway. Like fans are no one's turning off the television. No one's hurting them financially because they're playing these games on turf as opposed to grass. So really, to me, I don't know how the logistics of this works, but I think the players really need to get together and the players need to have a conversation. And the next time the CBA is up for a vote, the players of the National Football League need to put their foot down, and they need to refuse to play unless the National Football League agrees to putting grass in every single NFL stadium and only allowing neutral site games if there is grass on those neutral site fields. Like this is something that players should legitimately be collective bargaining for, because these injuries are costing some players their careers. These injuries are costing guys contracts. These guys are costing them years off of their career. So you just saw Mosley from Detroit, tore his left ACL, came back, first game back, tore his right ACL. His career's over. Like he's never going to get another contract after that. So like that poor guy is really struggling. You almost saw boy wonder himself, Travis Kelce. You almost saw him get hurt on field turf this week too. I wonder if that'll scare the NFL into doing something. Probably not, because it was just a low ankle sprain. But
why don't we get Taylor Swift to finance the grass?
Not even finance. All Taylor Swift needs to do is send out a tweet. All Taylor Swift needs to do is just tweet like, hey, I think it'd be great if my boyfriend and these guys could play on some grass. Dude, there would be grass in every stadium the next week.
Would happen instantly. Would happen instantly.
All right. Time to look ahead at the New York Giants, who the Buffalo Bills hope to rebound against on Sunday Night Football. Storylines galore in this game. Brian Daboll, number one, obviously returning to Buffalo. Tyrod Taylor could be QB1 in this game. Daniel Jones dealing with a neck injury that knocked him out of their previous game against the Miami Dolphins. He said after the game he was really sore, and the soreness reminded him of his neck injury 2 years ago, a neck injury that kept him out for 6 weeks. So we could be seeing Tyrod Taylor for the New York Giants next week. Isaiah Hodgins' revenge game. Where do you want to start? Like, what storylines do you want to talk about here, Dave?
Man, how about the fact that the Bills are still opening up as 14.5-point favorites, even with all the injuries. So that tells you what Vegas thinks about the New York Giants right now and how bad that team is. Now, the Bills need to really go out and take care of business in this game, like cover or not, like whatever. You have to win this game if you're the Bills. It's a home primetime game. You're coming off of a really gut-wrenching loss against the Jags. Like, there's going to be the revenge game narratives, of course, with Dayball, Taylor, the fact that it's like the understudies of the Bills regime going up against this Bills regime, and, Joe Shine and Brian Dayball, with Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. So, like, a lot of storylines, and I think it was smart for the NFL to put this game in prime time because of that. Obviously, the Giants were a playoff team a year ago, but man, they stink this year, and the Bills really, that's what you're going to hear a lot about, I think, is these storylines, because on the field, this game really should not be close. It really should not be. So let's hope it's not, and the Bills go out and blow this team out.
Yeah, I mean, reasons to feel confident in this football game. The New York Giants have scored a total of 0 first half touchdowns this season. They have not scored an offensive touchdown in the first half. Their only offensive touchdown, or their only touchdown in the first half, came last week on a 102-yard pick six from Jason Pinnock off Tua last week. They have had the lead for a total of 19 seconds this season. Their come from behind win over the Arizona. 19 seconds they've had a lead in this season. 19. Like, that's crazy. 19 minutes, 19 seconds. Their offensive line, led by Bobby Johnson, is an absolute shambles, and they're probably not going to have Andrew Thomas again this week. And he seems to be the one guy who just keeps it all together. He's going to be out. QB1 Daniel Jones is likely out, and the way he's been playing, it's probably an upgrade for them with Tyrod Taylor.
I think it's an upgrade. I think it's an upgrade.
And
I really do.
If Saquon Barkley does play in this game, it'll be an early return from a high ankle sprain. So who knows? He'll probably be limited. Who knows what kind of oomph that he'll have. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, there's a lot of reasons to be confident. I think that 14.5 points, if the Buffalo Bills don't meet it and have a coast-to-coast blowout win on prime time, I'm probably not going to be happy, even if we win the football game. Just from a fan perspective, what is your confidence level heading into this football game?
We needed this game at this point on the schedule. like this is one where it's like you would have hate to look up after that Jags game with all those injuries and see like Miami again on the schedule, or like the Chiefs or someone like that. Yeah. Like, you got, like, as much as it stunk going over to London and then coming back and dealing with these injuries, you got like the Giants coming up on the schedule. You got a little bit extra time to gather yourself since it's a Sunday night game. Your confidence level really, regardless of the injuries, needs to be like a 9 or 8 to 10 range for this one, because double-digit point spreads in the NFL are rare. 2 touchdown point spreads in the NFL are even more rare. Now, I know statistically and historically, teams have struggled to cover that large of spreads over the past decade plus in the NFL. So we'll see what happens in this game. But those teams generally have still ended up winning those games in almost all cases. So confidence level needs to be high. Like, injuries, yes, that's going to be kind of a cloud hanging over this team's head for the whole season, but you really can't let that affect your confidence for this game.
Like Pops Mafia coming in saying, "Hey, Tyrod Taylor should be the Bills' legend of the game. Let him wave the flag in his Giants jersey and then let him go play." That would be interesting. I doubt the full Bills do that, but that'd be funny. Reasons to have some doubt. I don't know. Like, Brian Daboll knows Josh Allen. Maybe he can share some things with Wink Martindale to get under Josh's skin. I mean, Wink is a well-respected defensive coordinator in this league. Pops Mafia comes in, says any given Sunday, right? They have some horses up front in the New York Giants. Guys like Leonard Williams, guys like Dexter Lawrence, guys like Kayvon Thibodeau. So they certainly have the names on paper to go out there and cause some problems and wreak some havoc on Josh Allen. What, if anything, maybe gives you a feeling of uneasiness heading into Sunday Night Football?
Yeah, I think RJ hits some pretty good points here. Yeah. A lot closer than people think. Tense all night. Daboll knows our defense and knows Dorsey's shortcomings on offense. I do think that there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Bills because there's like zero expectations right now on the Giants. Like, Giants are going to be playing, loose, playing desperate. So that's one thing that's dangerous to me, is like playing against a desperate team. If Saquon Barkley's back, he has shown in the past, like, he has recovered quickly from other sort of minor injuries. Like, obviously he's faced some major ones in his career, but other minor injuries he's come back from and performed pretty well. So like, that gives the Giants a glimmer of hope. And like, look, they have some guys to facilitate the ball to, right? Darren Waller hasn't been maybe utilized as much as Giants fans would like to hope. And Tyrod out of the pocket could be dangerous as well, right? So we don't know. Trevor Lawrence didn't really do a ton of damage necessarily with his legs against the Bills, but like, it's not necessarily saying that a team can't. And the Giants didn't have to travel, so it won't be a far travel game for them either. So that's
All right, that should just about wrap things up for this evening. A couple other things to mention before we head out of here. Number one, Patriots suck now. I think Jessica Tennis was mentioning that in the comment section. That's always super fun. Mac Jones just keeps getting benched mid-game, but Bill Belichick is not benching him for good. A source close to Mac Jones essentially said, "What am I supposed to do? I'm surrounded by garbage." That was a fun quote. SportsCenter debating this morning whether Bill Belichick is just a normal coach without Tom Brady. That's always fun to see. And good on Nathaniel Hackett being the Denver Broncos, despite the fact that offense, other than Breece Hall, is just absolutely inept. I so badly, like, the Buffalo Bills carried Jim Schwartz off the field when they beat the Lions a couple of years ago, and I so badly wanted Nathaniel Hackett to get like a Gatorade bath or something. And that whole game, I sadly just watched that whole game because I was so fixated with Nathaniel Hackett versus Vance Joseph, the two most inept coordinators in football, going up against each other. Oh boy, that game definitely disappointed. It was awful from start to finish. Zach Wilson sucks. I don't care what anyone says. I'll say what Rodney Harrison is not allowed to say on national TV. Like, he's not a good quarterback. Like, he's not a starting quarterback. He's barely a backup quarterback. There is no hope for the New York Jets that he's going to be anything. I am so mad the Buffalo Bills continue to lose to Zach Wilson, and I hope that streak comes to an end in a couple of weeks when we have to play them again. And Vance Joseph, I don't know how he keeps getting employed by National Football League head coaches as a defensive coordinator. That defense is terrible, awful. So that was just an all-around funny game. And the bottom two teams in the AFC East the Jets are hanging in there, but the bottom two teams in the AFC East are certainly floundering right now.
They're floundering. At least the Jets have some.
That defense is so good.
And Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall are really, I mean, like, the Patriots don't have anything equivalent to that, right? So it's like, but I'm with you. I mean, my friend, I've talked about him on this show. My best friend's a Broncos fan, and like, he's texting me during the game, like, I don't know how Vance Joseph is still employed, like all these funny texts like that. And like, another friend of mine's a Jets fan, so it's like them going back and forth. Like, he's like, is it going to be so bad it's good? And like, no, it was not so bad, it was good.
All right, so again, our weekly challenge after the show is over, go and comment on this video with your biggest takeaways from Bills, Jaguars. We love your comments during the show. Keep those coming, but comments after the fact really help us with the algorithm and boosts our videos. We really appreciate your support. Dave, any final thoughts before we head out of here?
Nope. It's on to prime time, man. I got to get this game out of my head, move on. Looking forward to just starting a new week ahead. Yeah.
Our next show, Sunday morning, the official Air Raid Hour Bills Giants pregame will kick off probably 11:45 or 12 p.m. Eastern, leading into that 1 p.m. window. So if anyone wants to catch it on demand, they can do so while the 1 and 4 o'clock games are playing. And then the Bills in Orchard Park, not London, thankfully, will be taking on Brian Daboll and the New York Giants. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We truly appreciate all your support. This show would be nothing without you guys in the comment section. And Dave, until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!